Today, we are diving into what is, without a doubt, the single deadliest conflict in all of human history, the Second World War. This was a war that literally engulfed the entire globe, fought on every single continent except Antarctica, so let's get right into how it all happened.
To even begin to understand the scale of this, you have to start with this number. Just try to wrap your head around it. An estimated 70 to 85 million people died. That's more than the entire population of many countries today. It's a figure that's almost impossible to truly comprehend, and it really sets the stage for what we're about to explore.
So the big question is, how on earth did the world get dragged into a war this massive? What could possibly lead to this level of death and destruction? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
To find the answer, we actually have to go back a little. See, World War II didn't just happen out of nowhere. You could say its seeds were really planted at the end of the First World War.
A huge part of that was the Treaty of Versailles. For Germany, this treaty was absolutely crippling. Think about it. The country lost a huge chunk of its territory, all of its colonies overseas, and was forced to pay these massive reparations. It created this perfect storm of national humiliation and economic chaos, which, as you can imagine, is fertile ground for extremism.
And right into this mess steps Adolf Hitler. In his book, Mein Kampf, he laid out his terrifying vision for everyone to see. He was obsessed with this idea of a pure German race and taking what he called Lebensraum, or living space, by force. This quote here is just a chilling glimpse of the genocide he was planning from the very beginning.
And if you look at this timeline, you can see how things just kept escalating. In 33, Hitler starts rearming in secret. Then in 35, the world basically does nothing when Italy invades Ethiopia. By 38, Germany's just grabbing up territory like Austria, and the other European powers are practically letting him, hoping it'll keep the peace. The final, and maybe most shocking piece of the puzzle falls into place in 1939, when Germany signs a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. That gave Hitler the green light he needed for Poland.
And that brings us to the moment the dam finally breaks. All those years of trying to appease Hitler are over. The war in Europe is about to ignite.
September 1st, 1939. That's the date. German troops pour into Poland from the west. Britain and France, they have no choice. They declare war 2 days later. But here's the thing, it wasn't just Germany. Thanks to that secret pact, the Soviet Union invaded from the east just a couple weeks later. Poland was caught in a vice. It never stood a chance.
So, how did Germany do it so fast? The answer was this brand new, terrifying tactic, blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Forget the slow, grinding trench warfare of World War I. This was all about speed and shock, using overwhelming force with tanks and planes to just punch right through enemy lines and cause total collapse.
And in the spring of 1940, the world saw just how devastating this could be. The German war machine seemed completely unstoppable. First Denmark and Norway, then they just sweep through Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. They bypassed France's main defense, the Maginot Line. They literally just went around it, trapping Allied forces and forcing that famous evacuation at Dunkirk. By June, Paris had fallen. It took just a few months for most of Western Europe to fall under Nazi control.
So with France defeated, Great Britain stood completely alone. Hitler started planning his invasion, but first, he knew he had to control the skies. What happened next was the Battle of Britain. For months, the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, bombed the UK relentlessly. But the Royal Air Force, the RAF, fought them off. It was an incredible defense, and really the first major turning point. It proved Hitler wasn't invincible.
Up until now, this was mostly a European war. But in 1941, two huge events happened that were about to blow this conflict wide open and turn it into a true world war.
Okay, so let's get our players straight. You've got two main teams. On one side, the Axis, led by Germany, Italy, and Japan. And on the other, the Allies. At first, Great Britain and France, but soon they'd be joined by two giants, the Soviet Union and the United States. These were the teams that would fight it out across the entire planet.
So here's the first game changer of 1941. In a shocking betrayal, Hitler turns on his supposed ally and launches Operation Barbarossa, a massive surprise invasion of the Soviet Union. This opened up the Eastern Front, which would become the largest and by far the bloodiest theater of the entire war.
And then, about 6 months later, on the other side of the world, the second game changer.
Japan, wanting to dominate Asia, launches a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. The attack was devastating, but it did one thing. It woke the sleeping giant. American isolationism vanished overnight. The U.S. declared war on Japan, and then Germany and Italy declared war on the U.S. And just like that, it was a truly global war.
So now the game has completely changed. With the industrial power of the United States and the sheer manpower of the Soviet Union in the fight, the momentum was about to shift big time. The Axis advance was about to be stopped dead in its tracks.
It wasn't just one battle, it was a series of knockout blows all around the globe that turned the tide. In the Pacific, the U.S. Navy absolutely shattered the Japanese fleet at the Battle of Midway. On the Eastern Front, the German advance froze and then died in the brutal battle for Stalingrad. And in North Africa, the British pushed the Axis forces back at El Alamein. This was it. This was the beginning of the end for the Axis.
With the Axis now in retreat everywhere, the Allies prepared for the final push in Europe. And this was the big one. June 6, 1944, D-Day. Over 150,000 Allied soldiers hit the beaches of Normandy in the largest seaborne invasion in history. This finally opened that second front everyone had been waiting for, forcing Germany to fight a massive war on two sides. The liberation of Europe had begun.
Okay, we're now in the endgame. The Axis powers are collapsing, but this final phase of the war is one of the most brutal. It all leads to the war's conclusion and the dawn of a very, very different world.
But before we get to victory, we have to pause and look at the human cost again. This chart shows a truly staggering reality. The vast majority of people who died were civilians, not soldiers. This was a total war where entire populations were the target. And that, of course, includes the 6 million Jews who were systematically murdered by the Nazis in the Holocaust, a genocide on a scale that is just impossible to fathom. By the spring of '45, the vice was closing fast on Germany. Allied forces were pushing in from the west, the Soviets from the east, and they met in the middle of a completely destroyed Germany. With Soviet troops taking Berlin and Hitler dead in his bunker, Germany officially surrendered on May 8th. Victory in Europe. The war there was finally over.
But even with Germany defeated, the war wasn't done. Japan was still fighting fiercely in the Pacific. Fearing that a land invasion of Japan would cost millions of lives, the U.S. made one of the most controversial decisions in history, to use a terrifying new weapon. In August, atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. Faced with this unimaginable destruction, Japan surrendered. On September 2, 1945, World War II was officially over.
And when the dust settled, the world was a completely different place. You've got the United Nations created from the ashes to try and prevent another war like this. You've got two new superpowers, the US and the USSR, staring each other down in a new Cold War. The atomic age had begun. Nazi leaders were tried for war crimes, and the old colonial empires started to fall apart. The world of 1945 was almost unrecognizable.
So what's the big takeaway here? The world we live in today was forged in the fire of this war. The institutions built in its aftermath have, for the most part, kept the peace between major powers for over 75 years. But the lessons from this time, about unchecked aggression, about hate, about the unbelievable human cost of war, are as important today as they have ever been. And it leaves us with one final, sobering question to think about.